Noble will be moderating this with Professor Collins and Professor Sutherland Adi. I now yield the microphone to Kofi.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Noble, as I was introduced. I was one of the associate producers for this film, Talking Black in America, Roots. And since the film was shot about 3 years ago, I've not had a chance to converse with either Professor John Collins or Professor Esi Sutherland. So I'm very much excited to be doing this today and to be given the opportunity to have another conversation with them since we shot the movie sometime in 2021. So since we have a literature professor and then a musicologist, I have just 2 questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for more questions. I think I'm going to start with Professor Esi Sutherland. So the question of, the whole concept of the film explores the concept of roots. And one thing that is clear is that orality, or the oral tradition, seems to be quintessentially an African phenomenon. And it shows itself in various forms, not just spoken language. So I just wanted you to throw more light on the concept of orality and how it has been shaped here at home and then in the African diaspora.
A whole semester's question. Okay, I think a few quick points about that. It's obvious from the film that you were trying to, sort of join up the dots there. Our whole culture is still alive in the oral form, and so it's a living culture, and I think that that's very important. That's one of the reasons why, as a scholar, I can't quite gel with the concept of folklore, for example, because a folklore makes it look like something that used to be done, and then, but if right now, today, the Asantehene were to walk in, he would be followed by his praise singers, and he's taken it all over the world. And so you can see that this is something that's alive. It's part of our lives. I'm sure that if I appeared somewhere, somebody would ask me why I was wearing this color, because today is Friday, and so they probably assumed that I was coming from a funeral, even if I wasn't. As a matter of fact, I'm wearing this just as a segue because of the fight against Galamsey, and we've been all asked to wear red something. So I think that I'm just passing it on, encouraging all of you, a red band, a red something. But anyway, and as Professor Agidoho said in the film, you don't only look at speech. You're looking at an entire way of life, and it's because of that anything that we are doing to suppress that culture is making sure that we die as a people. I have a very strong urge to talk to younger people about the orality that exists and is being encouraged through technology. And I really believe that that's an area that we need to explore in order for the orality to stay alive. And there's some wonderful things that are coming up, but then also some horrible things. For example, there are lots of parents in Ghana today that feel that it's the English that we learn in school that our children should speak and no other language, for example. And once that happens, everything that language contains is going to die with the people who currently speak it. So, I think that we shouldn't essentialize it either. Many cultures around the world use orality at important moments You know, so I mean, if when when the King Charles or whatever was being sworn in and so on, there was all of that, and so we shouldn't think that we are doing something that's in the dark ages. I think I told you, if you don't, I have to stop, otherwise I'll just keep going on.
Thank you very much. A very, very eclectic response. Professor Collins, you made a point in the film, and when I was writing the study guide for this film, it's a very quotable point concerning when you have an enslaved community. I mean, in order to survive, they have to be hyper creative. And I just wanted to link that to the blues and music, since you're a musicologist. Do you think jazz and music and the blues comes from this ultra creativity that you were trying to hint at in the film?
Yeah, I mean, if we were talking about religion, I would talk about the Romans taking the slaves to Rome and conquering Rome. It's a parallel. I mean, black music has actually conquered the world. The latest manifestation is Afrobeats. So I wanted to just say something about this, because everybody knows this rhythm. It's universal. I mean, we know it in Ghana as High Life Jama, in Trinidad as Calypso. It's one of the Afro-Cuban clave rhythms. It's found in Brazilian samba. It's even found in New Orleans, Bo Diddley beat. Now, the thing is that this is a transmuted African rhythm. So this comes in, what I was trying to say, but obviously in the film I didn't have a chance to say it, was that it wasn't just the talking drums that were banned by the whites. Because of the Haitian Revolution and the use of voodoo drums in overthrowing the French communication, it was also certain rhythms were banned by the whites, particularly rhythms, traditional West African rhythms related to ancestor worship and traditional cults and religions, because they wanted to destroy the spirit of slaves, to call on their ancestors and deities to resist the whites, which is exactly what the Haitians did. So they were petrified of talking drums. But the ban on drums wasn't just a ban on the physical talking drums, speaking out through tonal language, messages. It was the rhythms themselves. And so they were banned from playing 6/8 rhythms or 12/8 rhythms, which is about 80% of all African rhythms are polyrhythmic in 6/8 and 12/8. And most of the religious music, the ancestral music, is played in that time. So that's why I brought this drum. I wanted to show you how the slaves reacted to this restriction, overcame it, and what they overcame has now become the standard rhythm of the world, which is found in Afrobeats. So let me show you. Okay, so the one we know is, I'm playing two rhythms. Let me play the bell, and then this is the 4-pulse. So it's two rhythms going on. Now, the original African rhythm wasn't that. It was this. This is quite different. It means it's a polyrhythm in which the second rhythm crisscrosses the first rhythm. European music doesn't operate that way. It creates a master rhythm or clock or metronome, and everything has to fit inside. So what the slaves did is, when they were stopped playing their bell pattern, which, if you think about it, is 3+2. They decided to keep the bell pattern, because that's from Africa, but they had to kowtow to the Europeans and fit it into 4/4 time. And this is when this rhythm became transmuted. So it turned from an African rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2. And this happened all over I call it a Black Atlantic rhythm. We don't even know where it started, both sides of the Atlantic. That's the music that's conquered the world. I'll make it short. It's now has actually conquered the world. It's everywhere. Go to a country where they don't use that rhythm. Nigeria.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And for the performance, thank you. I think a few more questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience about the influences happening in the reverse direction. Let's bring it more to contemporary times. Do you see any influences happening in the opposite direction as a result of, maybe African American culture in various forms, whether in literature or in music, coming back to the continent in very interesting ways? If you've seen any of such reverse influences happening, if you can just throw a little bit more light on that.
Yes. So there are so many circular movements that are happening. And, one of them, of course, I'm sure Professor Collins, I'll leave it to Professor Collins as far as the music is concerned. But, speech patterns are being shared, and there are lots of professions, a number of professions in which people feel they must speak with the speech patterns of from the diaspora. One of them is the charismatic churches. I don't know whether you realized how the Ghanaian charismatic prophets and so on, are really imitating, the African American preacher, and. It's quite an amazing thing to be at. There's also, of course, people like presenters on radio programs. So people who present on reggae music are likely, very, very likely to use patois, for example, as part of their personality, So that's just two that you could take a look at. So let me pass it on to Prof.
Yeah, in terms of music, the return journey, that is America, the music of the Black Americas, returning home to Africa. In fact, a friend of mine called Professor Atta Anand Mensah wrote an article many years ago, Jazz Comes Home to Africa. This process of jazz coming home to Africa, using jazz in its broadest interpretation, actually goes back 224 years. 224 years. Freed slaves from Jamaica were landed in Freetown, and they brought with them the gumbe drum, a frame drum that spread into 14 Western Central African countries, and is found in Ghana as the gome drum. I'm just giving you the earliest example. Other examples are like Louis Armstrong coming here in 1956. By the way, next year, I think 2 years' time, it will be the 100th anniversary of Louis Armstrong coming here. Is it the 70th anniversary? And some people in New York want to celebrate this event. But this is a long-term process of ragtime coming, the rumba and so on. And so we can trace it back about 200 years. So it's not just a recent phenomenon. In fact, the word, the point of no return at Cape Coast Castle, I've been told that there is now a second phrase which says some of us are returning, because at least since the 1960s in Nkrumah, many African American and Caribbeans have returned home. But I was going to say they should add a final phrase, and we've been doing this for 224 years. That's how long the return journey has been coming. So before Du Bois, Padmore, Marcus Garvey, and the political reconnection between the two sides of the Black Atlantic, the musical connection was being made 224 years ago. That's the earliest evidence we have.
All right, thank you very much. I'd now like to open it up to the audience. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to have a couple of questions from the audience.
Oh.
Yes, there's one.
Well, I guess it's actually more to you. Why this film and why now?
Okay. So Talking Black in America, Roots, is part of a three-part series. So the first explored African American language, English, as it exists in America. And when that was shot, there was the need to think more broadly as to where the language and its variants could have evolved, or originated from. So the idea, came to now look back to Africa to see where these language connections could have, or even culture more broadly in music and all of that, where it could have originated. So I think we started working on it sometime in 2019, and we're supposed to shoot the film in 2020. Then COVID happened, and then we had to put it on hold. So for the whole of 2020, it were just conversations between the various people in the crew. And then after the wave subsided a little bit, we decided to shoot the film in 2021. And so I think when it was shot, the first viewing in Accra was at Pager Film Literary Festival. And then since then, we've had a number of viewings in New York, especially in New York City, and then Brooklyn and city itself. And we've had a couple of showings also in the South, in Louisiana area. And during that period, it got an Emmy nomination, so we had to go down to Atlanta for the awards and all of that. So we hope to show more of it, in Accra as well. So yeah, and we felt it was necessary because and I was telling a friend of mine yesterday that I'm happy to see that a couple of mystiques that surround certain things in Ghana is gradually falling. The mystique around, when you speak French or English, you're considered to be sophisticated, as opposed to speaking your own local languages. Gradually that mystique is disappearing, and it's a good thing that we will over time return to our own languages and our own mother tongues, and use it for, like Professor Anidoho said, for our own purposes of development. Thank you. There is a question at the back.
First of all, let me say that this panel has been incredible, and thank you for organizing for the comments. There are so many points that I'd like to mention, but I had a specific question related to my own work. So I am currently doing some oral history work on the island of Jamaica in rural communities. So these were plantations owned by the Pennant Douglases, British aristocracy who had various plantations in Jamaica in the 17 and 1800s. And I've been specifically asking questions about what is either described as folklore, and I appreciate the clarification in terms of folklore relative to oral history, oral heritage, which I entirely agree with. But specifically the question I have is something that has surprised me about this work, is when I've been interviewing, I went in to the study overwhelmingly believing that older men were my target audience in terms of understanding forest traditions. So names that people call trees, or beliefs about trees or forests or birds, that it is men who are in the forest. It is men who are the more ones who are adventurous out, and the foresters or the hunters, so to speak, in terms of interviewing hunters. What I was surprised about was how many of the interviewees said that the knowledge that they were sharing, which is either African influenced or uses African names, some of these names are tree names from Ghana, that they said that their grandmothers told them this. And I am still kind of debating, why they have disproportionately identified older women or ancestral women as a source of this knowledge, as opposed to saying it was my grandfather, a kind of a situation where they would have gone out with their dad or their grandfather and gotten it from their a paternal line. And still kind of thinking through how this exchange, where they're identifying their grandmothers, and whether or not this is something which they could have a tradition that actually came with them, or if it's something which has been happening within the Caribbean, Jamaican context within which the grandmothers have been playing this role. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, either within the context of here in West Africa, or your knowledge of the diaspora that could help to better inform this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that everybody who lives in Ghana will agree with me that the concept of going to ask the old lady, whether it's in a palace or whether it's in the family home, it seems as if the old women are the ones who are supposed to be the keepers of knowledge and those who also transmit the knowledge to the younger generation. So it's normal. I mean, it's a very common thing. And I was privileged to do a project on oral literature of not oral literature, but the thoughts and literature of women, women writing Africa, and what we found out all over West Africa and indeed throughout the continent was that women had a lot of knowledge, but they would hold it and use it as and when it's appropriate. So you will not find them, at the forefront. But when you really need, to solve a problem, and solve a problem by going to the source of knowledge, then you go to the older woman. So it's a normal thing. And I think one of the, just to bring it into contemporary times, one of the pressures that some of us feel, who have not had enough association with the traditions, is that people are coming to us and asking us, oh, somebody is dead, what are we supposed to do? And so it's like, goodness gracious me, you have to now, we are having to go to our aunties and things and say, auntie, save me. I mean, we've got to get this sorted out. But ordinarily we would have been in the line and we would have had the transmission done. So one of my pet problems that I think about a lot is the broken lines of transmission and how to heal those broken lines. So that's and I'm very excited about what you just said. Yeah, thank you.
And I'll also add something very quickly. I think it was Chinua Achebe who said in Things Fall Apart that when everything is okay, you are in your father's land. But then the moment you get into trouble, you go to your mother's land, because he said mother is supreme. So maybe.
Sorry, me again. There was a gentleman in the film who talked about how when he was a child, he was mocked for speaking his local vernacular. I'm thinking about the next generation. I have a 16-month-old. She's here. How can I get her to be excited about her local language? Because a lot of times our local language is othered, and sometimes I see our local languages are mocked. In all the schools I go to tour for, it's English that seems to be, the tool of education. So how can I get, in terms of the next generation, how do you make sure they're excited about languages?
Right. You have to be intentional about it, number one. Number two, our music has not lost that. I mean, I'm excited about young, rap musicians and various other, what do you call the thing? Let me not show my age, but you know what I'm talking about, contemporary musicians who are proud to use proverbial language and puns and so on, and multilingual. I think one of our presenters in the film was talking about that. So listening to music is very important, and teaching. It helps you to and trying to sing is very, very important. Another thing is that there are schools in which, in fact, in our public schools, everybody is supposed to do one of the local languages until they're in the junior high school. You may find difficulty with that because, of course, there's problems with the public school system and so on. But if you are sending your child to a preschool, you should do a little bit of work and find out preschools where they make efforts around this issue of language. And but the intentionality is very, very, very important. If you have help, encourage your help to speak to the child in a Ghanaian language, instead of the other way around, right? Some of our help the kind of English that they speak to our children. God save us. So it's very important for you, those of you who think that you should leave, everybody should speak to your child in English. Please don't do that. I mean, it's really critical for us to, but we have to take the steps. Yes.
First of all, let me say thank you for this amazing presentation. So my question more so leans around some things that were said also and have been reflected upon here, and how our languages, when we first start using them, are vilified. And so we're taught not to use them. Same thing happens with music. My father grew up on the blues and jazz, and he said his grandmother called that the devil's music. And now he calls hip hop and rap the devil's music, which is what I listen to. So it almost seems cyclical. But what my question is, to add on to what's been asked here, is while the music is being vilified, like Gullah or Geechee was being vilified, they lost a lot of it. And even he said, I would know a lot more Gullah than I originally did if it hadn't have been something that was picked on and vilified. So in our process of our music, our language, and everything being vilified, how do we preserve it so that when it comes back around as being a rich culture and a rich history, we wouldn't have lost such a sufficient portion of it?
Okay, actually you brought up a very interesting topic, generational change. Just to give you some examples from this side, over the last 100 years with the emergence of high life music, each time a form of high life developed, it was criticized by the elders or the older generation. Even sometimes it was banned. Even Palogo drumming was banned at one point. Music sort of reflects generational struggles. But I think you're right, things get recycled. I think the thing is the 3-generation link. It's when the society loses 3 generations of continuity. This is why the human family has got 3 generations for the last 200,000 years, because that ensures, continuity through the traditional family, not through writing or anything like this. This is the danger of what's happening in the West. You think you can learn things from books. You can learn a lot from books, but it has to come through the family. And the children, the role of the child is to question the parents. Sometimes the language will change, or they invent new expressions or new forms of music. For instance, when hip life started, the older generation here hated it. They said it was Kasahari, too fast, fast talk, and so on. So I think this is a part of a huge problem, continuity of language and culture, and the changes that occur cyclically with the generations. In terms of music, I'm very, very optimistic. I'm not a linguist or a language person, but in terms of music, the fact that African music has basically conquered the world, partly because the Europeans destroyed their music, because they took improvisation and dance out of their music. So it withered away, and into the vacuum came the habanera, ragtime, rumba, right up to the present day, but each one is being recycled. And the latest recycling, of course, is Afrobeats. And there was a huge row in Nigeria with the youth and the older generation about that. I was present. The older generation said they didn't like the word Afrobeats because it's too close to the word Afrobeat of Fela Kuti. And we of the older generation loved Fela Kuti. But these disputes happen, but at the same time, the continuity has to continue, if I can put it this way. I'll leave it to the linguists to work out. The poets.
Okay, so I think just a couple of quick points. One is just following what Frankie was talking about in terms of the role of academics and intellectuals in studying and creating a discourse and privileging, African knowledge. And I think it's important for us to also see what we can do. We've been trained to document, we've been trained to analyze, we've been trained to make sure that issues are kept at the top of the agenda. And I think that what we're doing now, when I was watching the film, I was thinking, are we still having to struggle the struggle, of having an identity and so on and so forth. So you're right in asking that question. But I think that those of us who are in academics must do that work of making sure that we have documented, we have recorded, we are creating a buzz around these issues, we are making them important at the global level, and I think that it's our duty to do that. It's not enough for us to say, Afrobeats, we recognize it, but if we're not creating a buzz around it and talking about it, it will sink. And, even, a lot of people, I admire schools, for example, where heads of schools and so on are having festivals for children, where they're going back to their roots and so on and so forth. It has to happen in that kind of a way. It has to be integrated into the everyday life, of our children. And I also want to say that there's a wonderful competitiveness that we have in Ghana now. Again, I'm going back to to technology, but there are these, stations, TV stations and so on, online and all of that are reflecting the various cultures, where there's a festival or they are interviewing older people and so on and so forth, and proudly putting that out online, proverb competitions and all of that. So I think that we shouldn't lose hope. There's a lot happening, but it's important for those who have access to, to blow this up much bigger, to encourage those who are doing, who are making these efforts and amplify their work. Thank you.
And I'll also add something very quickly. Recently, I watched a YouTube interview, and the panelists were Marcus Roberts, the jazz pianist, Wynton Marsalis, and Stanley Crouch. And interestingly, the question was about which music form or genre, whether rap or the blues, was going to outlive each other within the black community, right? And Marcus Roberts gave a very interesting answer. He said, in his opinion, again, they were vilifying rap music, being very much. And then he said the reason he feels the blues is going to outlive rap music is because, to quote him, it faces up to the natural catastrophes of life very well. And like Professor Anyudo said in the film, the blues come from the African death tradition, where you were singing as a result of the natural catastrophe of death. And you come to this music because it's a way to liberate you spiritually. So no one is going to call you to the blues, but you will come. When you meet certain circumstances in life. But then it is important that we introduce our young people to this kind of music and still introduce the culture to them, even though they may not see the significance at a certain age, but at a point in life when those catastrophes come, you will turn to the blues, as your cover, So yeah, that's what I will add to that. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we've run out of time. Thank you very much.